evening to all of us. My name is Joseph, and I'll be your tour guide for today. This is going to be a walking tour, and the story here is quite traumatic, emotional, sad, but the important aspect is what we are here to do today to bear witness to the crimes and atrocities our ancestors were subjected to. So, today, the world we live in, we never have to perpetrate such injustice against humanity. This is going to be a walking turn. We'll start right in front of the male slave dungeon. We see the female slave dungeon. We go upstairs to see the governor's residence. But everything should conclude at the door of no return. But before then, I'll give a brief introduction about the castles we have in Ghana and what triggered the transatlantic slave trade. Across the shores of West Africa, Europeans built about 60 forts and castles. Ghana alone had about 40 of them. And this was because of the abundance of gold in the country. So the first settlers, which is the Portuguese, they named this region the Gold Coast. So they were naming the countries based on what they were deriving from them. A country like Cote d'Ivoire had the name Ivory Coast because of the abundance of the ivories. So out of the 40 forts and castles built in Ghana alone, only 3 are castles, with the rest being forts. And today, 19 of those forts are still in existence together with the 3 castles. So the first ever European structure on our land, the oldest European structure you will come across in Africa, the Elmina Castle or the St. George's Castle, built by the Portuguese in the year 1482, 543 years old. Second castle built in Ghana is in Osu, the Christian War Castle, built by the Denmark's or the Danes in the year 1661. In Cape Coast Castle, we find ourselves today happens to be the third, the last, and the youngest. 361 years old, built by the British in the year 1664. But this edifice we see today wasn't built at a go. When the Portuguese settled in Elmina, some of their men were here. But they constructed a timber lodge and stayed here for so many years. But in 1637, the Dutch fought them at Elmina. So they left and abandoned this place. 1653, the Swedish took over. They built a fort and called it the Karolsberg Fort. Stayed here for 5 years. 1658, the Danes attacked them, so they left. Danes were here, Dutch attacked the Danes. Danes left, settled in Accra, and they built the Osu Castle. So the Dutch were here, and the English came and fought them, captured the fort built by the Swedish, and elevated it to the castle we see today, purposely for the transatlantic slave trade. So when you visit Elmina Castle or Osu Castle, you wouldn't experience underground dungeons like what we are going to see today, because initially these 2 castles were trade posts. So they had storage rooms and warehouses where they kept their commodities for the barter trade. But when the demand changed and they saw the trafficking of the Africans to be more profitable, they also converted their warehouses and storage rooms into cells and dungeons. But before the transatlantic slave trade, there was the Arab slave trade or the trans-Saharan trade, which was happening at the northern part of Africa and the Middle East. So Europeans were in contact with Arabs for African commodities, slaves, gold, spices. But it got to a point they needed a new sea route to the source of the trade routes because they wanted to avoid paying high taxes on these commodities and eliminate middlemen. So in 1492, Europeans' expedition and exploration landed them on the shores of Bahamas. There, Christopher Columbus and his men visited Cuba and Hispaniola and mistakenly thought the rich parts of the East or India. They believed trading with the Arabs, the source of the trade routes was in India. So there mistakenly he claimed he has discovered the New World. But already there were indigenes in the New World, so they named them the Red Indians and the island West Indies. So there they established plantations and mines. But we got to a point labor was an issue for them because the indigenes and the European servants who were used on these plantations were dying. Some died of harsh working conditions. Others of European disease such as influenza, measles, whooping cough. Their presence in the New World has exposed them to. So it wasn't economical to use the indigenes and the servants on the plantations. So a Catholic missionary named Bartolomeo de las Casas, he made a suggestion that Africans should be used as an alternative, simply because Africans are perceived to be hardworking, working under similar climatic conditions, good in agriculture, and resistant to both tropical and European diseases. So if they are to come in for the Africans, it will save the indigenes from dying. And this suggestion actually triggered the transatlantic slave trade. So from the 15th to the 19th century, it is estimated that About 12.5 million of Africans who made the journey were taken to the Caribbean and Americas, which is the New World, to work on their plantations. And also about 3 times or 4 times of those who survived died. Wherever they got the captives from, bringing them to the castle, in the dungeons, transporting them over the seas to the Caribbeans and Americans, those who died were more than those who survived. Wherever they got the captives from across West Africa, they came in, captured them with force. Some had their compounds raided. When they tried to escape, they kidnapped them at gunpoint. Some were deceived of better living in foreign lands. Unfortunately, they got to persuade some African chiefs and leaders to sell their captives of wars, tribal wars, among others, to them. Wherever they got them across West Africa, they journeyed them all the way in chains and shackles, barefooted to the castle. On their way, it took them weeks, months, so they had to create resting points for them. And these resting points are what they termed as the slave market. But the slave market, which played a vital role in the enslavement of Africans, happens to be that same as the slave market. And then they rested, shaved their beards and hairs to look energetic and young, took their last baths as Africans. In the castles, there was no shower for them. So there they took their last baths, made their body with shea butter to heal their wounds and also to make them look attractive. And they fed them something to sustain them. And reaching the castle, the first place they were sent to is the Palaver Hall. The nurses and doctors are there to examine their strengths, determine whether you be a domestic slave to work within and outside the castle, or you be a commercial slave. You wait in the dungeon, you wait for the ships to arrive to be taken to the Caribbeans and Americans, and you go work for them. After they auction them and exchange them for the commodities, gunpowder, tobacco, mirror fabrics, among others, they are brought to the forecourt to be branded. Branding them because it was different slave companies buying them at a time. So for easy identification, they had to brand them. And with the branding, they use branding irons or metals with the names or logo of the slave company which bought you. They put them into fire. When it's hot, they take it out into an iron straight to their bodies. After they were separated into their respective dungeons, the male captives were sent down here, and about 100 meters from this place is a female slave dungeon. They were also held, waiting for a minimum of a day, maximum of 3 months for the ships to arrive. This is what transpired in the castle. Any question before we proceed with our work? They called it a Society for the Propagation of the Gospel, which is currently today the Anglican Church. Churches started right from the castles. At the forecourt to the Methodist Church started. When you visit Elmina, you see the Catholic Church seated at their forecourt today, which is their museum. And also castle, they had the Presbyterian Church start right on top of the female dungeon. It wasn't a coincidence, it was a form of mental slavery, indoctrination used to enslave Africans. You see 2 plaques on my side. So the one on my right was unveiled on the 11th day of July 2009 to mark the visit of the Obamas. The former president of the United States was here with a wife because the wife, Michelle Obama, chooses a route directly to the staff. So after visiting, they unveiled the flag to mark their visit. And the one on my left, which you see, delivers a powerful message. Revealed in the year 1992 when Ghana celebrated the first Pan-African Historical Theatre Festival. One to render an apology for the role their predecessors played in the enslavement of Africans. Because whether we like it or not, Africans, we ourselves were complicit, giving them land, selling your people off, showing them routes to pass. We also played a role. So they revealed this to apologize and also to tell us never again should we perpetrate any injustice against humanity. So we step into the dungeon and proceed with our work. So.
Okay. Yeah, they will never.
All right, so please, when I say I'll go, you respond. I mean, it's a form of hello, hi. I'll go. All right, so please, for a real experience, we will experience some moment of silence for just some few seconds. All right. I'll go. Amen. All right, so please, this was the situation in here. The light we see today is just for the purpose of the talk. So the holes we see up here provided them with light and ventilation. A room which held about 1,000 enslaved men had only 9 holes across the 5 chambers, which was providing them with light and ventilation. So I turn on the lights and we continue with our talk. Alright, so please, we are in the first chamber of the blue dungeon, and this dungeon has been partitioned into 5 chambers. Each held about 150 to 200 captives at a time. It could be more, it could be less, depending on the time the ship is arriving to take those in here. So in here, they eat everything. They eat, they sleep, they go to the toilet, they do everything around their home mess in here. And today, we see we are standing on bricks, which happens to be the original floor. But when you take a look at this portion and the rest of the chambers, you see them to differ from what we are standing on today. This was because in 1974, a group of archaeologists of the University of Ghana came in and excavated this place. Then they got together that the bricks we stand on today happens to be the original floor. But before the excavation, the whole of this place was a darkened surface. So after the took samples into testing, and everything that these are human waste. There are toilets, urine, blood, saliva, vomit, sweat, flesh, blood, which with time has solidified on the floor. So whatever you will be working on from the second chamber to the fifth chamber happens to be the waste of the African enslaved men here. This chamber particularly is the only chamber in the dungeon which had a door. Because this room was for those who were seen as rebellions, trying to fight them every day for their freedom. So they chains and shackles, they chain all of them together. There are some holes on the walls, they tie them to the walls. But if it gets to a point you are on control level, they take you to the convent cell. You go in the back, you come out there, just to save us one to those who live here. Any questions before we proceed with our talk? Alright, so let's see the rest of the table.
So I have a question. With the issue of African selling themselves to these slave masters, did they willingly sell them or persuaded?
Some were greedy, some didn't want to do so. They just had to form alliances, and those, if you are against them, they will just have to take you off and form alliances with those who will. Some were greedy, some didn't want to. So those who were greedy, they got to persuade them. Alright, so please, you are welcome. Alright, so this is the middle dungeon and had 5 chambers. Held about 150 to 200 in each. So about 1,000 enslaved men from the first chamber to the fifth chamber. And whatever we are standing on is their waste. The toilets, the urine, the blood, the flesh. And this trench which we see now, connects from the first chamber to the fifth chamber through to the sea. It was to serve as a passageway for the waste of the African enslaved men here. So they expected that whenever it should come in from the boats and flush their waste from the first chamber through to the sea, but it wasn't working. How many times did it rain? And what's the probability that the wind would blow the rain to this direction? Given what speed is it coming to flush among their waste? So it wasn't working. So the time their waste solidified on the floor. That's what we are standing on now. They had their outside vents which provided them with light and ventilation, but they also had the inner vents. Alright, so please, we stand in the fifth chamber of the middle dungeon. This place happens to be bright during the day, whether there is light or no light, because of the inner vent which served as a spy hole for the captives. So whenever ships arrive for the captives to be taken to the New World to work on their plantations, the shrine we see here today, initially there was no shrine, but rather there was an underground tunnel which connected the middle dungeon to the door of no return. So captives wouldn't have to use the same entrance they came into the dungeon as an exit. So they marched them all through the underground tunnel. And today, unfortunately, the tunnel itself has been blocked. So we can't go through. But out there, on our way to the female dungeon, I'll show you a portion for a view of the tunnel. The tunnel was blocked in 1834 by Captain George McLean because in 1807 a law was passed in Britain to abolish slavery, but those in here didn't stop. He came in 1830, and after 4 years, he sought the closure of the tunnel just to end British slavery in here. It's the small room to my left. Whenever ships arrived, those who were seen as weak, unfit, or unable to make the journey were found there. If you recover, you join the next available ship. If you don't recover, you die. The body is thrown to the sea. So the sea serves as mass barrier for Africans. But the reason why we are seeing a shrine in the male dungeon is this entire castle sits on the rock. And the rock happens to be the foundation of this castle. But the rock happens to be a deity or a god as well. But when they were here, they weren't allowing the indigents to worship. So the indigents themselves returned to samples of the rocks into the town to continue their prayers. But when they left and the chiefs and people in Cape Coast took over, they had this in mind to return the leader of the 77 gods we see here today. Cape Coast do believe in 77 gods, and this is the leader, and the name is Nana Sabre. So the money we see here are taken from tourists and those who come into consult. And the stools you see there are for those who come into consult to sit as well. And the flowers and wreaths in here are brought in by those who want to pay homage to the ancestors in here. Also those who trade their roots directly to this castle. Any question? Alright, so we continue on to our No, please. No. The whole of this courtyard was a graveyard, but the sea was also a cemetery for the Africans. Africans who died were thrown into the sea. But the whole of this courtyard, they buried the Europeans who died here. But in 1996, there was an excavation, and a whole lot of these graves were covered because they had no names or descriptions on them to identify them. And today, only 4 of these graves remain. So the isolated one we see here happens to be the only black man buried in the castle. He was buried here because of what his father did for them. The boy is Kweku, a Wednesday born. His father was a local merchant selling Africans to the Europeans. So the dad had relationship with them. So the son at the age of 11 got scholarship to study in England. There he was baptized and given a Christian name Philip. His name Kweku was corrupted on Kwaku, so he got the name Philip Kwaku. And at the age of 24, he was ordained as the first African Anglican missionary. When he turned 25, they brought him back. Right up here is the church which sits on top of the dungeon. Here he preached for over 50 years before he died. But I got to a point treatment for him in the castle changed because he started to speak evil against what was done to his African brothers and sisters in here. So salaries and other incentives at a point were seized. So from time to time, he would in the community how to read and write the English language. So the first ever basic school in Cape Coast is named after him, Philip Kwaku boys, and now they do have Philip Kwaku girls as well. Western form of education in Ghana is mostly attributed to him. Died at the age of 75 in the year 1816. The 3 you see lined up there are all European graves. The first one you see here is a British Army commander named C.B. Whitehead. In 1812, he died at the age of 38. There is no actual confirmation of the cause of his death, but some do believe he died of malaria. Others say in one of the wars in 1812, he got shot by a Dutchman, but there is no actual confirmation on the cause of his death. And to the middle happens to be a British lady named Letitia Elizabeth Landy. 1838, she came all the way from England to visit the husband, but barely 2 months she was found dead in one of the rooms upstairs. There were so many rumors. So the first rumor says she died of malaria. Second rumor says when she came to see the husband, she found the husband having an affair with an African mistress named Ellen Bannerman. So out of jealousy, she poisoned herself. And the last rumor says the African mistress came into the castle conspired with the husband to kill the wife Letitia so they could continue their relationship. So please, which of these three women do you think is true? All right, so she died at the age of 36 in the year 1838. And the last one happens to be the husband, the man who blocked the tunnel, which connected the male dungeon to the door of no return. He was Captain George McLean, introduced Ghana to the Western form of court system we use in Ghana today. Died at the age of 46 in the year 1847. And it is confirmed malaria killed him. To the far end happens to be their water systems or reservoir. So please, let's get close and have a look. To stay in the castle. So back then they harvested the rainwater whenever it rained. They connected pipe to the roofs of the building to harvest the rainwater. And this water was used to cook for the captives, served as drinking water for them. There are female captives selected to be raped. This is what they used to fetch water from and freshen you up before you move into their bedrooms. But today, or currently, they've connected pipe to it. So in case there is shortage of water in the castle, there is a machine here to pump it out to run the chores of the castle, the washrooms and other places. We had 4 of these, 2 here and 2 behind us, and each one of them is 18 feet deep, 8 feet wide. Any question, please? All right, so let's see the contents of the soup. I'm going inside, entering, watch your head. The frames are very short. So first one, second one to the middle, third one before you get inside the room. So please, as you enter, watch your head.
You are kept there till you die.
All right, so please, this is the condemned cell. In here, no food, no water, no air penetrated. Today, even when the lights were off, the room was still bright because the first door, which we see in the castle, outside that door, any window or door you come across, has been changed or in place. Here, the soldier station in front of the door is to ensure that if 10, 20, and they could hold up to about 50 people in here. If the number of people in here, the last man has to die before the bodies are taken out to lay them at the forecourt, just to serve as warning to those who want to fight them before the bodies are thrown into the sea. We haven't even been here for about 4 or 5 minutes, but we all can feel how hot this place is. So those in here died of suffocation and starvation. Any questions, please? All right, so we are going upstairs back into what you're doing. For Ghana's colonialism for 118 years, and the bond was signed at Palava. And today, the place has been renovated and used for different activities. And even as of now, there's a program ongoing. So, unfortunately, we can't see the Palava. But the place has been renovated and used for exhibitions, conferences, meetings, and other activities. So, here, we drafted the bond, and the bond was signed at Palava, together with 8 Fante chiefs, which paved the way for Ghana's colonialism. So we gained independence in 1997. And this is where the first court in Ghana started, introduced to us by Captain George McLean. This was his office, and right here, we introduced Ghana to the Western form of system we use in the country today. Everything we see has been changed or replaced but they try to keep the shape of how the place should look like. Stepping out, the tiles we are going to work on, as in change of the place, they are called marble slates or marble tiles, brought in by the British. Since then, it hasn't been replaced. Perhaps for the British soldiers, they were stationed here, and the building to the middle was their canteen, but now that building serves as a cafeteria. And during the colonial period and after colonialism, here became a prison. Here was a prison till 1992. It was moved from here to a place called Ankafo. And today, Ankafo prisons is one of the biggest prisons in Ghana. Please, we should take a look up the hill and we should see some old White House. The lighthouse of the hill. These have you all seen it? Alright, so this is Fort Williams. It was named after King William the Fourth of England. And there is another one to my left, but we wouldn't see it from this direction, so we would have to get to the governor's bedroom before we see Fort Victoria. So when we do, I'll explain the purpose of these two British forts. Right, so we go this way. This is the living room for the couple. 9 windows up here, 2 at the corridor, 5 in the bedroom. 16 bigger windows up here for one man. And about 1,000 enslaved African men had only 9 holes, which provided them with light and ventilation. So usually we compare situations up here to those in the dungeons. So please, let's take a look at the bedroom. In and out, they wanted to keep eyes on the captives down there in the dungeon. Sorry, that's not. Sorry. So no dungeon. And I will explain to you how to do it. These are the cannon balls. They also are the mortar balls. So the mortars are the short ones you see in front of the reception area. So these cannons are used for the long range, and they use the mortars for the short range. And there are 2 types of these balls. There are the rounded ones, which you just saw, which we are seeing now. These are the rounded ones. And also when you take a look, you see the hollow ones. Some of the balls have holes in them. So these balls, they put in the gunpowder before they insert it into the cannon or the mortar. So when they shoot and the ball hits the ship or the enemy on land, it's supposed to explode. But the rounded ones are just meant for the ship, just to hit the ship, create a hole, eventually the ship will sink. So that's how they defeated their enemies. Either they bomb you or they sink you. They protected themselves and stayed here for 290 years. In question, captives wouldn't have to use the same entrance they go into the dungeon as an exit. So in the fifth chamber, we saw a shrine, but initially there was no shrine. The entrance of the tunnel started from there. So this is just a portion of the tunnel I just want to have a view or a look. So they walk all the way through from where the shrine is today, all the way through. Here, the soldier was just stationed here with a gun to pressure them to move faster. Another was here to keep an head count, just to make sure all those who went through the tunnel will come out at the exit. So we are yet to see the exit point where they will come out from the tunnel. They wouldn't want to walk them through the forecourt just to prevent any revolt. If they fight you and unfortunately the black community is there, it means all you came to do was for nothing. So it kept them through an underground tunnel. So is it clear? All right, so please we see the exit point. Some few seconds. All right, so please, this is the female slave dungeon, and the female dungeon had only 2 chambers. The male had 5 chambers, and each of the chambers held about 150 to 200. So here They have two. So we are looking at about 400 enslaved women in both of the chambers. Here they did everything just like the male captives. They do everything in here. Go to toilet, sleep in here, do everything stuff in here. So the reason why they added the female captives was when they get to the new world to work on their plantations, they will help the men with the domestic work, especially of water cleaning and other stuff. And most importantly, for reproduction, they will allow them to mate with the black men just to increase the number. The children will also become slaves on these plantations. But the saddest part is female captives would have to undergo menstrual cycle every month. And those in here did everything in here. So the blood, the infection, the trauma, the stage, the diseases was even enough to get some of them killed. So those who were found dead in here, they took them out and dumped their bodies into the sea. Those who were found pregnant were taken from the dungeons. They had break houses in the communities. You deliver, you'll be with your baby for some time. After the mother is then returned back to the dungeons because already you've been paid for. You are a property to someone. So after the mother is then brought back to the dungeon to be transported. The kids were trained up in the church on top of the dungeon. So the church was also the school for the mulattoes or the mid-grade babies. And the babies growing up, some became slave merchants, some involved themselves in the business, and others left the country. So this is what transpired in here. Any question before we see the infamous door of no return? So we stand in front of the door of no return. All those who went through this door never returned. May those who died rest in peace. May those who return find their roots. Entering this door, you lose your rights as a human being. Your identity as an African is lost. In case you get yourself on a Christian plantation, they will tie you, give you Christian names, force you to bear the same names of your slave masters. As time went on, they were forced to learn their languages just to bridge the communication gap. The trade actually happened in 3 continents. They took the slaves from Africa to the America to work on their plantations. Whatever they produce on these plantations are sent straight to Europe. So if it is sugar cane, Europe, they are transformed to finished goods, sugar. They brought back the sugar back to Africa to exchange for the slaves. Went on for over 300 years. Movement on the map was in the form of triangle. So they called it the triangular trade or the transatlantic slave trade. Using the Atlantic Ocean we see as the Middle Passage. Some were taken to the northern part of America, some to the southern part of America, some straight to the Caribbean lands, and some straight to Europe. Today we tend to see Africans all over the world. Today we get to walk through the door of no return, but we are guaranteed a return back. We are very fortunate. So we go through, see what's behind the door of no return. We made it to the ship because of the numbers. They had to arrange them head tail, head tail, head tail. We'll be in the same position for about 3 to 4 months before you get to your destination. Some didn't want to eat, some wanted to die out of hunger, but they had to force them to feed them just to survive to get to their destinations. So they used the tool known as the speculum oris or mouth opener. There are so many literatures at the reception, and it will be very nice if you take a look at when you are moving back to wherever you came from. So they use the speculum oris. They force them to open their mouth just to feed them for them to survive so they get to their destination. And sometimes when they felt like the ships are heavy, they would have to throw some of the alive captives into the ocean or the sea just for them to keep balance till they get to their destination. Movement en route to the Caribbeans and Americans was even dangerous. But today we take a look back and we have door of return. Door of return for you and I. Americans in the diaspora were invited to come home. And those who came didn't come alone. They assumed 2 skeletons, one from Jamaica, Miss Crystal, one from New York, says some of cousin. Flew them all the way from wherever they planned to come to Accra. From Accra to this place, they drove by car. But from Apanze, there is a place called Apanze from Accra to Cape Coast. Then they changed their routes. If our ancestors were transported using the sea, then they would also bring them back using the sea. And Apanze, you will see Fort Amsterdam. So there they changed their route and used the sea to the castle. Walk them through the door of no return So the narrative had to change from door of no return to door of return. And today we do believe our ancestors have returned home. But please, those recording, don't post my mistake. All right. So they
Don't
walk
worry.
them through the door of.
Don't worry.
All right. So they walk them through the door of no return, and today we have door of return. They performed the funeral rite at the forecourt for them. It was known as the Great Homecoming, and their remains were sent to Asimanso where they took their last bath as Africans, and they were buried. Today we believe our ancestors have returned home. Any question before we go inside for the conclusion?
Just say you're doing well.
Oh, thank you.
You did amazing.
All right. So.